I missed the most important flight of my career and begged to borrow my parents' car. Your sister needs it for a spa day, my father said, then slapped me. I left without a word. 2 days later, my mother called in panic. Why aren't the bills being paid? The first thing I noticed when I hit the floor was how clean the carpet was. Isn't that strange? You'd think the first thing you'd register after your father's open palm connects with your face hard enough. Music to snap your head sideways would be pain or shock or the copper taste of blood pooling behind your teeth. And those things came, but in that first split music second, that suspended, surreal fraction of a moment where your brain refuses to process music, what happened? I noticed the carpet. Cream-colored Persian, hand knotted, 8 FT by 10. I had bought it for my mother 2 Christmases ago, paid $20,400 for it because she'd mentioned once, offhandedly, that she'd always wanted a real Persian rug in the living room, not a mass-produced knockoff from a big box store, but an actual one with actual history woven into it. I remembered staying up until midnight reading about density and pile height and regional weaving techniques, trying music to make sure I got it right, trying to make sure she'd love it. I was lying on that rug now, tasting blood, with my cheek pressed against fibers I had paid for, and I thought, this is what I bought with my money. My mother adjusted a throw pillow on the couch and said nothing. My sister Chloe went back to filing her nails, and in that moment, before I stood up, before I walked out into the rain, before I drove 8 hours through a storm and closed a $1 million deal and methodically dismantled every financial safety net I had quietly been holding over my family's heads, I made a decision so calm it almost scared me. I was done. Not angry done. Not crying in the car. Done or venting to a friend done. I mean done in the way that something fundamental and structural shifts inside you and simply never shifts back, like a door that can be closed but not after a certain point reopened. I stood up, slowly smoothed the front of my blazer, and walked out of that house for the last time. This is the story of what happened next. Let me back up, because if I start at the slap, you won't fully understand the weight of what I walked away from, not just emotionally, financially, structurally. You need to understand the architecture of my family's dependence before you can understand why dismantling it one automated payment at a time felt less like revenge and more like finally putting down something I had been carrying so long my spine had bent around it. My name is Maya Hartwell. I'm 31 years old. I have a master's degree in business administration from the University of Michigan, and as of 8 months ago, a VP level position at a mid-sized tech consulting firm called Arcbridge Partners. It's the kind of job people work their entire careers to reach, the kind that comes with a corner office and a company card and occasionally the chance to fly across the country on 48 hours notice to present to a client worth 7 figures. To the firm, I grew up in a suburb of Portland, Oregon, in the kind of house that looks very comfortable from the outside. For bedrooms, a 2-car garage, a backyard with a gas grill. My father operated like a religion every summer. My mother, Diane, was a part-time bookkeeper who worked 3 days a week and spent the rest of her time redecorating rooms that didn't need to be redecorated. My father, Arthur, had been in commercial insurance for 20 years until his firm restructured and let him go at 53, at which point he pivoted full-time to watching cable news and being disappointed in people. And then there was Chloe. Chloe was 24, 3 years younger than me, and had the unshakable confidence of someone who had never once been allowed to face a consequence. She had dropped out of 2 colleges, turned down a receptionist job because she found the commute spiritually draining, and spent the previous year building what she called her wellness brand on Instagram, which, as far as I could tell, consisted of posting photos of herself in robes at high-end spas and captioning them things like alignment is everything and protect your frequency. She had 2,300 followers. She had been doing this for 14 months. She had made in that time exactly $0. I, on the other hand, had been quietly, automatically every single month for 5 the following the mortgage on my parents' 4-bedroom house in the Portland suburb of Lake Oswego, $2,100 a month. The lease on the BMW 3 Series my father had leased in Chloe's name as a brand investment when she started her wellness journey, $680 a month. The household utilities, electric, music, gas, water, which averaged around $340 per month depending on the season. Internet and streaming services, $180 a month. Groceries set up through an auto pay arrangement with a Local delivery service, $600 a month. Total, somewhere in the neighborhood of $3,900 a month, $47,000 a year for 5 years. If you're doing the math, yes. Yes, music it is. It had started as these things often do, gradually. When my father first lost his job, I sent a few $100s to help with groceries, just temporarily, just to help. Then the mortgage came up short 1 month and I covered it just once. Just an emergency. But in my family, just this once was the mechanism and temporary was the trap. 1 covered bill became an assumed contribution. 1 month became a year. 1 year became 5. And they never said thank you. Not once, not ever. What they said instead was things like, you know how stressed your father is. What they said was, Chloe needs to focus on her brand right now. What they said over and over in 1,000 different registers was, you can afford it. As if affordability were the same thing as obligation. As if the money made this lap make sense. Here's what happened the week everything broke. I had been in back-to-back client calls for 3 days straight when my assistant, Priya, sent me the calendar notification. I had been dreading the Ellison Group. Final presentation had been moved up. Not pushed back, moved up. The Seattle meeting, which I had been preparing for over 6 weeks, was now in 48 hours. Instead of the 10 days I had budgeted, the Ellison Group was a $20 million per year logistics company looking for a full-service consulting contract. My firm had been in a 3-way competitive bid for 9 months. I was the lead. My name was on the pitch deck. My job, not just my bonus, but my actual continued employment at Arkbridge, was directly tied to whether I walked into that conference room in Seattle and delivered. My flight was booked for the next morning, PDX music to SEA 7:15. Young United canceled it at 9 p.m. the night before due to mechanical issues. The next available direct flight didn't leave until 4 p.m. the following day. 3 hours after my meeting, my car, a 2019 Subaru Outback, was at the dealership for a transmission service. I had dropped it off that morning and wouldn't be ready until Thursday. I called the service manager, David Kimura, a guy I'd known for years, at 9:15 p.m. He was apologetic and genuine, and completely unable to help me. The parts hadn't come in. There was nothing he could do. I checked rental agencies. Every rental within 15 miles of me was sold out. There was a last-minute surge. Some regional conference had cleaned out the local inventory. There was one agency, a small, dingy outfit called Pacific Rim Auto Rentals, on the edge of the city that had a single car available, a 2018 Nissan Versa with 94,000 miles on it, smelling, per the website reviews, of cigarettes. $1,000 for a 48-hour rental. Their surge pricing policy. I booked it as a backup. But first I drove to my parents' house because they had the BMW sitting in the driveway being used the next day for nothing more than a chakra alignment appointment, and I thought naively, I see now, with the particular naivety of someone who still can't quite accept that their family is what it actually is, music, that surely, when confronted with the choice between their daughter's career and a spa appointment, they would make the obvious call. I knocked on the door at 10 p.m. My father answered in his recliner posture, which he had somehow maintained in motion, slumped, music, jaw forward, the physical grammar of a man who considers any conversation before noon an imposition. I explained the situation clearly and without drama. Flight canceled, car in the shop, $1 million meeting in Seattle in 36 hours. I need to borrow the BMW for 48 hours. I will pay for a full detail when I bring it back. I will fill the tank. I will be careful. He didn't look away from the TV. Chloe needs it tomorrow. I turned to Chloe, who was on the leather sofa, a sofa I had helped pay for in a house I was paying the mortgage on, filing her nails with the serene detachment of someone who has never had to care what anyone else needed. Chloe, I said, keeping my voice level, this is my career. This meeting could determine whether I keep my job. The BMW is just sitting there. Can I please borrow it for 2 days? She looked up at me then. She actually looked up, and what I saw in her face wasn't cruelty, exactly. It almost worse. Genuine indifference. The look of someone who has been told her entire life that her comfort is the primary variable in any equation. I have my chakra alignment tomorrow, she said. I'm very stressed right now. Your chakras, I said. I'm about to lose my entire career over your chakras. You always make everything about you. My father snapped, muting the TV for the first time, and then he stood up. I don't know why I didn't see it coming. I've replayed it probably 400 times. since that night, and I genuinely cannot identify the moment where I should have known to step back. He'd never hit me before. He'd said awful things, yes. Dismissive things, cutting things, the kind of low-grade contempt that masquerades as high standards, but never. This never physical. He crossed the room in 4 steps and hit me with an open palm, full force, across my left cheek. The sound was very loud in that quiet house. My head snapped right. My teeth cut into the inside of my lip. I went sideways and caught myself on the arm of the sofa, Chloe's sofa, and then my legs gave and I went down onto that cream-colored Persian rug, and the world tilted for a moment, white and ringing. I don't know how long I was on the floor, probably 3 seconds, probably. Music, alas. What I know is that when I looked up, my mother was on the other end of the sofa, and she reached over and straightened a throw pillow and did not look at me, and Chloe had gone back to her nails, and my father was standing over me, breathing hard through his nose, like a man who had just completed a physical task. I stood up. I didn't scream. I didn't cry. I'm genuinely not sure I felt the pain yet. Adrenaline is a remarkable thing. I just looked at them, all 3 of them, in turn, in this house that I was paying for, on this rug that I had bought, in this life. They had all built on the foundation of my quiet, unacknowledged labor, and I walked out. Then Nissan Versa smelled exactly like the reviews promised. I paid the $1,000 on my Amex, took the keys from a bored overnight attendant named Terry, who didn't look up from his phone, and pulled out of the Pacific Rim Auto Rentals lot at 11:43 p.m. I stopped at a CVS, bought a bag of ice and a box of lip balm, and sat in the parking lot for 4 minutes with ice against my face, taking inventory. The lip was split, swollen, but not serious. My cheek was going to bruise, but it was manageable. I had good concealer, and at this point, a reason to apply it carefully. My laptop was in my bag. My presentation was backed up in 3 places. My meeting was in approximately 30 hours. I had everything I needed. I opened my banking portal at 11:51 p.m. with one bag of ice against my face and absolute clarity in my chest, and I began BMW. Lease auto pay canceled. Music, I had been the authorized payer on Chloe's car lease since it was signed, a detail my father had arranged without comment, the same way all financial arrangements in my family were arranged, by simply informing me they had been made. Utility accounts, electric, gas, music, water, removed. Internet and streaming, deleted. Grocery auto delivery, canceled. And the mortgage, I had actually stopped paying this 2 months earlier. I want to be clear about that timeline because it matters. I hadn't stopped it in a snap decision on the night my father slapped me. I had stopped it 60 days before, when I'd had a conversation with my therapist, Dr. Renata Ose, a licensed clinical psychologist who had been working with me for 2 years on exactly this subject. And she had said something that landed differently than anything else she'd said before. She said, Maya, you keep asking why they treat you this way, but I want you to ask a different question. What would change if you stopped making it so comfortable for them not to change? I had thought about that for 2 months. Music, and then quietly, without announcement or ultimatum or drama, I had called the mortgage servicer and removed myself as an authorized third-party payer. The account was in my father's name. The debt was in my father's name. I had simply stopped covering a debt that was not mine. I called the servicer again from the Pacific Rim parking lot at 12:06 a.m. and confirmed the formal removal. I spoke with a woman named Sandra in their accounts department, who confirmed that a notice of default would be generated and mailed within 5 to 7 business days for the outstanding balance. 2 months. Music, or approximately $4,200, and asked if I had any other questions. I said no and thanked her. Then I drove 8 hours north through a rainstorm with a split lip and a playlist I hadn't listened to in years, and I didn't think about any of it. I just drove. I arrived in Seattle at 8:17 a.m. with 4 hours until my meeting. I checked into the Kimpton Hotel Alexis on First Avenue, where Arkbridge had booked me a room. I showered, applied makeup with more care than I had in years. The bruise on my cheek was yellowish and tender. I covered it completely with 2 layers of full coverage foundation and a setting powder that my college roommate had once called the good stuff, and I put on the navy blazer I had pressed and packed before any of this happened, back when the world was still predictable. I wore red lipstick. I don't always, but I did that day, and I think you can probably understand why. I walked into the Ellison Group's conference room at exactly 12 p.m., and I was met by their CFO, Marcus Webb, their VP of Operations, Tanya Oduya, and 3 members of their executive team. Marcus was the decision maker. I had done my research, and he had the focused, evaluative energy of someone who had sat through 100 pitches and was no longer interested in being charmed, only convinced I was not there to charm him. For the next 2 hours and 40 minutes I presented. I answered every question. I anticipated the 3 pushbacks I had anticipated and 2 I hadn't, and I handled all 5 without notes. When Marcus asked at the end why Arkbridge was the right choice over the other 2 finalists, I gave him an answer I had been constructing for 6 weeks and refining in my head during 8 hours of rain-soaked highway driving, and I watched his expression move from skeptical to considering to something that looked cautiously like decided. Tanya shook my hand on the way out and said, "We'll be in touch within 48 hours." The call came in 19. It was Priya, my assistant, who picked up the email first and forwarded it to me with a string of exclamation points that I'm fairly certain is unprecedented in her communication history. The Ellison Group had selected Arkbridge. The contract value at initial scope was $1.2 million. My managing director, Dennis Calloway, 17 years at the firm, the kind of man who communicated exclusively in brief, precise statements, sent me an email that said simply, "Outstanding work. Let's talk about your title." I read that email sitting on my hotel balcony, 20 floors up, with a glass of red wine, and the Seattle skyline beginning to go gold in the late afternoon light. That's when my mother called. "Why is the Wi-Fi down?" she said by way of greeting. "No." "Hello. No, how are you?" "No, Maya, are you?" "All right. I watched your father hit you last night and said nothing. Just the pressing practical catastrophe of an attenuage." The bank called about Chloe's car, too, she music added. "Did you get hacked or something?" I looked out at the city below me. I thought about Sandra in the mortgage servicer's accounts department. I thought about the notice of default, which should have arrived in the mailbox that morning or the morning after at the latest. "My accounts are fine," I said. "Then fix it right now." "Chloe can't even upload her spa photos. This is a disaster." "I stopped paying," I said, "because your husband slapped me for asking to borrow a car." There was a pause, and then the register of the conversation changed. My mother has a specific gear she shifts into when she realizes she cannot redirect or dismiss, and it is very loud and very fast, and cycles through blame and victimhood with remarkable efficiency. I held the phone slightly away from my ear and watched a ferry cross the water below. Then Arthur took the phone. He was in his threat voice, the one he used when he was establishing dominance, lower than his regular speaking voice, colder. He said, "I had responsibilities to this family." He said I was being vindictive. He said he would come to my office, and before you get in the car, I said, "Go check the mailbox." Silence. Music. I heard him move, heard the chair, the footsteps, the front door, the sound of his slippers on the porch steps, the creak of the metal mailbox, the small, papery sound of an envelope being opened, and then nothing for a moment. What? His voice was different. All the heat had gone out of it. What was left was flat, stripped music, the voice of a man looking at something he doesn't want to be real. What is this? Notice of default, 15,000. Music past due. "Maya, what did you do?" I took a sip of wine. "I stopped paying you," I said, 2 months ago. The threat voice was gone now. What came back was something I had never in 31 years heard from my father. Desperation. Raw. Unmasked. Unstrategic desperation. The sound of a man who has just discovered that the floor was not actually the floor. "We'll lose the house," he said. "Maya, this is our home. It's in your name." I agreed. "So is the debt." Music, and then something shifted again, and he was begging. My father, Arthur Hartwell, the man who had muted his television and crossed a room to hit his daughter over a car, was begging. He called me baby. He called me sweetheart. Music, he said. He was sorry. He lost his temper. He didn't mean it. "Please, please, please." That was when I heard Chloe in the background, not talking. Music. Screaming. "My car. Mom, they're taking my car." I had called the BMW leasing company from the road the day before and confirmed that a repossession order would be initiated if the next scheduled payment, which I had just canceled, failed to process. I had spoken with a representative named Jason in their collections department who had walked me through the timeline with the particular efficiency of someone who has had this conversation many times. The repo truck had arrived on schedule. I listened to my sister shriek as the sound of a truck engine, and a chain hitch carried through. The phone from 3 states away, and my father made soft, broken sounds, and my mother called my name, Maya, 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 like it was a thing that could reach me. I waited until Chloe's screaming hit its peak, that high piercing frequency of someone who has just discovered the difference between a life with consequences and a life without them. Then I said, now would be a great time for her chakras to kick in. And I hung up. I should tell you what happened in the weeks that followed, because I know how this kind of story goes. You want the full accounting. My father called 17 times over the next 3 music days. I answered once on the 4th day, because there were practical matters to address, and I am not someone who avoids practical matters. I gave him the contact information for a HUD-approved housing counselor named Robert Finch, who I had already called on his behalf. Robert specialized in foreclosure prevention and had over 20 years of experience music navigating. Exactly the situation my parents now face. I told my father that Robert could help him explore options: loan modification, repayment plans, potentially a short sale if it came to that, and that if he was willing to take this seriously and actually engage with the process, he had more runway than it might feel like right now. I did not offer to resume the mortgage payments. I did not offer to reinstate the utilities, the internet, the car lease, or the grocery delivery. What I offered was a counselor's phone number and the information that the choice was now, as it always should have been, his. He called Robert Finch. I know this because Robert, with my father's signed consent, sent me a brief update confirming the initial consultation had taken place. They're working on a loan modification. It is uncertain. It is, as I said, in his name. Chloe did not call me. I did not expect her to. In the absence of someone to fund her inertia, she moved in with a friend in Northeast Portland, and last I heard through a mutual acquaintance had taken a part-time job at a juice bar. I don't know if this is growth or circumstance. I suspect circumstance, but circumstance sometimes is where growth starts. My mother called twice more, both times she wanted to talk about what had happened as though it were a mutual misunderstanding, a miscommunication, a thing that 2 reasonable parties had contributed to equally. I told her both times that I was happy to have a different conversation when she was ready to have it, one that started with her acknowledging what she had watched happen in her living room and chosen to ignore. She hasn't called back since I went to see Dr. Renata Osei the week I returned from Seattle. I sat in her office, a calm, plant-filled room in the Pearl District where I had been having some version of the same conversation. Music for 2 years. And I told her what had happened, all of it. The slap, the drive, the presentation, the phone, music call, Chloe screaming, the fairy in the distance. She listened the way she always listened, with the kind of focused stillness that makes you feel simultaneously observed and safe. When I finished, she said, "How do you feel?" I thought about it for a moment. Not the polished, edit-ready version, the real one. Clean, I said, like I put something down that I didn't realize I'd been carrying in a way that was changing the shape of me. She nodded. That's worth paying attention to. I'm not happy about it, I added. I want to be clear about that. I don't feel victorious. I feel like I finally got honest about something I'd been lying to myself about for a long time. What were you lying to yourself about? That paying for them was love, I said. It wasn't. It was fear. Fear that if I stopped, they'd confirm what I'd always suspected, that my value to them was financial, not relational. And they did confirm it. They confirmed it the second he slapped me for threatening to withhold the car. Dr. Osei wrote something in her notebook. She does that sometimes, not during the whole session, just in specific moments. And I have always found it oddly comforting, the idea that something I said was worth writing down. How did the meeting go? She asked. I smiled. We got the contract. She smiled back. Of course. You did. There's an epilogue here, and it's not dramatic. Life after the dramatic parts generally isn't. Dennis Calloway followed through on his email. 3 months after Seattle, I was promoted to Senior Vice President of Client Strategy at Arkbridge Partners. I have a team of 7 people, a client portfolio that I am proud of, and an apartment on the 20th floor of a building in the Pearl District with a balcony I use more than any other piece of real estate I have ever owned. I still drive a Subaru Outback, same one. Actually, it came out of the shop too. Days after I got back music from Seattle. I've put 14,000 miles on it since. It is reliable and unpretentious, and it does not require me to justify its existence, which I find increasingly to be a quality I value in the things I keep in my life. The Persian rug is not in my parents' house anymore. When I went to collect the few things I had left there, which I did, once with a friend present on a Tuesday when I knew my parents had an appointment, I rolled it up and brought it with me. It lives now in my office at Arkbridge under the conference table, where my team has their Monday morning meetings, 8 feet by 10, hand nodded. Without knowing the story, that's fine. I know it. I have thought many times about whether I did the right thing. I've examined it from enough angles to understand that it's not a simple question, and I don't think it deserves a simple answer. My parents may lose their home. That is real, and it is hard, and some part of me carries the weight of it even now, even knowing that. The weight was never mine to carry in the first place. What I know is this: you can love people and still stop funding a version of your life that requires you to be small in order for them to feel large. You can grieve the family you deserved and still walk away from the one you got. You can stand up for a Persian rug you bought with your own money in a house you paid the mortgage on and decide quietly, permanently, without screaming, that this is the last time I had bought that rug because I wanted my mother to love it. Would I have music learned sitting 20 floors above the city with a glass of wine and the kind of silence that doesn't need to be filled? Is that I was always the one worth loving. It just took me 31 years and an open palm slap to stop waiting for someone else to say so first.